When I realized my husband no longer noticed me, I didn't cry. I stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold in my hands, and I smiled instead. Not because I was happy, but because somewhere deep inside, I finally understood something I had been avoiding for years. I had slowly disappeared from my own life. The house was quiet that morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that echoes. My husband sat in the living room, eyes fixed on his phone, scrolling without looking up. I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to notice me, waiting for him to ask how I slept, waiting for anything. But he didn't look up. And in that moment, something inside me sank gently, like a stone dropping into still water. People think these realizations come with shouting or tears. They don't. Sometimes they arrive softly, like a whisper you can no longer ignore. I had built this home with my hands, my time, my care. And yet, I felt like a guest standing quietly in the corner. Unseen. Unneeded. I didn't always feel this way. Once, long ago, he looked at me like I was the center of his world. Once, my presence mattered. But years passed. Responsibilities grew. And somewhere between meals, laundry, support, and silence, I faded. Not because he pushed me away, but because he forgot to hold me close. That morning I set the cup down. I didn't say a word. I didn't complain. I just stood there and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. When did I stop being someone he sees? We have been married for more than 20 years. Long enough for love to change its shape. Long enough for habits to replace effort. Long enough for comfort to turn into carelessness. When we first married, we had very little. A small rented house. Second-hand furniture. Big dreams. He worked long hours trying to build something for us, and I stood beside him. Always that I cooked meals late at night when he came home tired. I listened when he talked about his worries. I believed in him when he doubted himself. When money was tight, I made it stretch. When life felt heavy, I carried it quietly. I told myself this was love. And maybe it was. At least in the beginning. We had children. Life became louder, busier, more demanding. I became a mother, a planner, a caretaker. The house became my world. And slowly, I stopped asking for anything for myself. Not because he told me to, but because it felt easier to give than to ask. My husband grew into his role. More confident, more settled, more distant, without realizing it. He stopped asking my opinion, stopped noticing when I was tired, stopped seeing the small efforts I made every single day. Not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. Our conversations became short, practical. What's for dinner? Did you pay the bill? Where's my shirt? And I answered. Always calmly. Always kindly. Even when something inside me felt empty. At family gatherings, people praised him. They admired his success. They spoke of how lucky I was. I smiled and nodded. No one asked how I felt. No one asked what I gave up. And I didn't volunteer the answer that I thought this was just how life works. That women fade quietly into the background. That being needed was enough. That love didn't need attention once it was secure. I was wrong. But it took me years to see it. There were signs. Small ones.
Moments primers bruixa Asira.
Like when he didn't notice my haircut. Or when he forgot my birthday. Or when I spoke and he didn't really listen. I told myself not to be sensitive. Not to make problems. Not to ask for too much. But silence has a way of growing heavy. And one day, it became too heavy to carry alone. That morning in the kitchen wasn't special. Nothing dramatic happened. But it was honest. And honesty has a way of changing everything. After that morning in the kitchen, life did not suddenly change. That is how these things happen. They grow quietly, like cracks in a wall you walk past every day. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. That I was tired. That everyone goes through phases like this. But the feeling did not leave. It followed me through the house. From room to room. From day to night. I started noticing the little moments more clearly. Moments I once ignored. Moments I once excused. like how he would come home and talk about his day without asking about mine. I would listen,
Nod.
respond softly, and when I finished speaking, he would already be somewhere else.
His phone.
The television, his thoughts. Sometimes I would pause in the middle of a sentence, just to see if he noticed. Most times he didn't. And each time, something inside me folded in a little more. Not anger, just quiet hurt. One evening, I cooked his favorite meal. Not for any reason, just because I remembered how much he liked it. I placed the plate in front of him. He glanced down and said, "Okay." That was all.
No smile.
No thank you.
No noticing.
I stood there for a second longer than usual, waiting, but nothing came. So I turned away. That night, as I washed the dishes, I felt tears in my eyes. Not because of the food, but because I realized something painful. I was trying,
And he didn't even see it.
I began to feel tired in a way sleep could not fix. A deep tiredness, the kind that comes from giving without receiving, from showing up without being acknowledged, from being present without being seen. At family gatherings, the feeling grew stronger.
People spoke to him.
Asked his opinion, praised his work. I sat beside him, smiling politely. Sometimes I tried to join the conversation, but my words floated away, uncaught, unanswered. That I stopped trying after a while. One afternoon, I mentioned I wasn't feeling well. Not seriously sick, just tired. He replied without looking up, "You'll be fine." And maybe I would be, but in that moment I didn't need fixing. I needed care. There were days I wanted to speak, to tell him how lonely I felt, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. I didn't want to sound needy. I didn't want to create tension. I didn't want to be a burden. So I stayed quiet, and the silence grew louder. I started doing things alone. Small things at first. Drinking tea by myself. Sitting near the window. Taking short walks. Not because I wanted space, but because I already felt alone. He didn't notice that either. He assumed I was fine. Because I always was. Because I never complained. Because I had trained everyone to believe I needed nothing. One night, I asked him a simple question. "Do you still enjoy spending time with me?" He looked surprised. "Of course," he said quickly. Then he went back to his phone. That was the answer. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't betrayal. It was something quieter. Neglect. Comfort. Forgetting. And those hurt in a different way. I began to question myself. Was I asking for too much? Was I being dramatic? Was this just what long marriages become? I searched for answers in memories. In other people's lives. In silence. One day, I overheard him talking to someone on the phone. Laughing. Engaged. Present. His voice sounded different. Lighter. I stood in the hallway, listening without meaning to. And I felt something twist inside me. He still knew how to show interest.
Just not with me.
That was when the conflict truly began. Not outside, but inside my chest. Between what I gave and what I received. Between who I was and who I had become. I stopped pretending everything was fine. Not openly, but inwardly. I began to feel distant. Not cold, just tired of reaching. Some evenings, we sat in the same room without speaking. Two people sharing space but not connection. The television filled the silence. But it couldn't fill the gap. I wondered if he noticed the change in me. If he felt the distance. Growing. Or if he assumed I would always be there. Waiting. Giving. Holding things together. I still did my responsibilities. Still cared. Still showed up. But something had shifted. I was no longer invisible by accident. I was invisible by habit. And deep inside, a quiet question began to repeat itself. How long can I live like this? The rising conflict wasn't loud. There were no fights.
No accusations.
Just a slow unraveling. A woman realizing that love without attention slowly fades into loneliness. That realization stayed with me. Day after day. Night after night. Until one moment came. A moment I could not ignore. A moment that changed everything. The turning point did not arrive with shouting. There was no argument.
No slam doors.
No harsh words thrown across the room. It came on an ordinary evening. The kind of evening we had lived through hundreds of times before. And that is what made it hurt the most. I remember it clearly. The sky outside was heavy with clouds. Not raining yet. Just waiting. I was in the kitchen making dinner. The same dinner I had made many times before. My hands moved on their own.
Chopping.
Stirring. Cleaning as I went. I had learned to work quietly.
To take up little space.
He came home later than usual. Dropped his keys on the table.
Sat down without looking at me.
I asked softly, "How was your day?" He answered without lifting his head,
"Fine."
That was all. I stood there for a moment, holding a spoon, listening to the sound of it tapping gently against the pot. Something inside me felt very still.
Too still.
I carried the plate to the table, placed it in front of him. He glanced at it and said, "You didn't add enough salt." That was the moment, not because of the words, but because of how small they made me feel. I felt something break. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just a quiet crack inside my chest. Years of holding things together loosened. And I realized something painful and clear. He did not see me. Not anymore. I sat down across from him. My hands rested on the table. They were steady. My voice was steady too. "I feel invisible," I said. He looked up then. Truly looked. Confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. I took a slow breath. "I take care of this home. I take care of you. I take care of everyone. And you don't even notice me." The room went quiet. Even the ticking clock sounded louder. He frowned. "I don't understand," he said. And I believed him. That hurt even more. "I don't need praise," I continued softly. "I need to be seen. I need to matter." He leaned back in his chair. Silent. Uncomfortable. As if this was the first time he had heard my voice clearly. "I thought everything was fine," he finally said. I nodded. "That's the problem," I replied. There was a long pause. He looked down at the table. Then back at me. "I never meant to make you feel this way," he said. "I know," I answered. But intention doesn't change the feeling. Tears filled my eyes then. Not angry tears. Just tired ones. "I gave you my whole life," I said. "And somewhere along the way, you stopped noticing." He didn't speak right away. His silence felt different this time. He wasn't distracted. He was thinking. Really thinking. "I didn't realize," he said slowly. "I got comfortable." I nodded again. "So did I." I whispered. "I got comfortable being quiet." That was the truth. I had helped build this silence. By swallowing my needs. By excusing his distance. By believing love meant endurance. The rain started outside. Soft at first. Then steady. The sound filled the room. Neither of us moved. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "I'm asking you to see it."
He looked at me.
Really looked. As if seeing me for the first time in years. And I felt something shift. Not relief. Not joy. Just clarity. That night, I went to bed alone. Not because we were angry, but because I needed space. I lay there in the dark, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of years press gently on my chest. I asked myself a hard question. What happens if nothing changes? And another one followed. What happens if I finally change? The turning point wasn't about him.
It was about me.
Choosing not to disappear anymore. Choosing to speak. Choosing to stay present in my own life. The next morning, I woke up different. Not louder. Not stronger. Just awake. I didn't rush to the kitchen. I didn't plan the day around him. I moved slowly. Deliberately. As if reclaiming pieces of myself. He noticed. He asked, "Are you okay?" I answered honestly. "I'm figuring things out." That was the moment everything stood still. Between what we were and what we could become. Between habit and intention. Between invisibility and being seen. The turning point was quiet, but it changed the direction of everything. The days after that conversation felt different. Not lighter, not easier, just more honest. The house was the same. The walls did not move. The furniture stayed where it was. But something unseen had shifted. We moved around each other carefully at first, not because we were angry, but because we were aware. Aware of the silence. Aware of the words that had finally been spoken. Aware of the years we could not take back. He tried. Not in big ways. Not in ways people notice from outside. But in small, uncertain steps. He asked how I slept. He waited before speaking. He listened without interrupting. Sometimes he forgot again. Old habits do not leave easily. But this time I noticed the effort. I changed too. That was the hardest part. I stopped rushing to fill every silence. Stopped fixing everything before it broke. Stopped pretending I needed nothing. When I felt tired, I said so. When something hurt, I named it. Quietly. Without blame. One morning, I did not wake up early. I stayed in bed and watched the light move across the wall. I listened to the house wake up without me. The kettle boiling. Footsteps in the kitchen. I felt guilt rise. Then I let it go. He came into the room later. "You didn't make breakfast," he said. I looked at him calmly. "I needed rest today," I replied. He paused. Then nodded. "Okay," he said. And that one word felt like respect that we began to talk more. Not about chores. Not about plans. But about feelings. About pressure. About loneliness. About how easy it is to lose someone while living beside them. Sometimes the talks were short. Sometimes heavy. But they were real. One evening, he said something that stayed with me. "I thought providing was enough," he admitted. I looked at him gently. "Providing matters," I said. "But presence matters too." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." Forgiveness did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces. In effort. In consistency. In moments where I felt seen again. And I forgave myself too. For staying silent. For shrinking. For believing love meant sacrifice without limit. There were still quiet days. Moments when I felt the old distance return. But now I did not disappear inside it. I spoke. And when I spoke, I was heard. Not perfectly. But honestly, one afternoon, I went for a walk alone. No reason. No destination.
Just me.
The air was cool. The world moved gently around me. And I felt something I had missed for years. Myself. When I came home, he asked where I had been. "I went out," I said. He smiled.
I'm glad.
No questions.
No guilt.
Just space. That was when I understood something important. The resolution was not about fixing him. It was about reclaiming me. About stepping back into my own life. Without apology. We are still learning. Still unlearning. Still choosing each other with intention instead of habit. Our love is quieter now. But deeper. More aware. More careful. I no longer measure my worth by how much I give. I no longer disappear to keep peace. I am here. Fully. The woman who built this home is no longer invisible inside it. And that, to me, feels like healing. Now, when I look back on those years, I do not feel anger. I feel understanding. Understanding of how easy it is to lose someone slowly. Not through cruelty, but through comfort. Through routine. Through forgetting to look up. I loved my husband deeply. And I still do. But love alone is not enough if it is not seen. If it is not heard. If it is not returned with care. For a long time, I believed my worth was in how much I could give. How much I could endure. How quietly I could hold everything together. I thought that was strength. But strength is also speaking. Strength is also resting. Strength is also choosing not to disappear. This home still holds our memories. Laughter. Arguments. Silence.
Love.
But now it also holds honesty. And honesty changes the way a house feels. I wake up differently now. Not earlier. Not later. Just with intention. I ask myself what I need. And I allow myself to need things. That small change has made a big difference. My husband still earns.
So do I.
We are not perfect, but we are present. And presence is something I will never take lightly again. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You matter. Your tiredness matters. Your silence matters. And your presence deserves to be noticed. Do not wait until you feel invisible to speak. Do not believe love requires you to vanish. The people who truly love you will want to see you fully.
This is not a story about blame,
It is a story about awakening,
about realizing your value.
about stepping back into your own life with quiet strength. I am still here, not as someone forgotten, but as someone who remembers herself. And that has made all the difference. Thank you for listening. May you be gentle with yourself. And may you always be seen.